Something is seriously wrong in Cleveland, and the newest footage might be the clearest proof yet. For weeks, fans have argued about whether Shedeur Sanders is the problem, or whether the offense around him is quietly falling apart. But this latest clip, a fan-compiled breakdown that's now exploding across social media, has people wondering if the issue is far bigger than missed assignments or cold weather. Because what the footage shows isn't normal. It isn't explainable. And it sure doesn't look like professional-level protection for a rookie quarterback fighting for his future. Play after play, you see the same disturbing pattern. Linemen drifting away from their assignments, multiple players blocking a single defender while others come through untouched, and a quarterback forced to escape pressure before routes even develop. And the craziest part, most fans wouldn't have noticed any of this if analysts and retired players hadn't started breaking down Shedeur's tape frame by frame. What they found was chaos, not just a struggling unit, but a line that looked completely disconnected from the offense it's supposed to protect. That's why this footage is blowing up so quickly. It isn't just about a bad block or a missed read. It's the growing belief that something deeper is happening behind the scenes, whether it's miscommunication, poor coaching, or frustration boiling over inside the locker room. Because no matter how you slice it, the patterns don't make sense. Not at the NFL level, not with a young quarterback already taking a beating, and not for a team that claims it's committed to developing its future. And as this clip continues to spread, more people are asking the same question. How much more can Shedeur take before something finally breaks? The moment the footage hit social media, the reaction was immediate. Fans weren't just surprised. They were stunned, confused, and in some cases, outright furious. Because this wasn't one of those, maybe the angle is bad situations or a play where two linemen simply miscommunicate. This was a full collage of back-to-back snaps showing the Cleveland Browns' offensive line doing the exact opposite of what an NFL line is supposed to do. And the most alarming part, none of it made sense. On the now viral clip, you see a 3rd and long where everyone is lined up perfectly, the defense showing a normal 4-man rush, and the Browns with 5 linemen ready to protect. In theory, this should be one of the easier pass protection situations. But as soon as the ball is snapped, everything collapses. Instead of picking up their assignments, the right side of the line drifts toward the inside, leaving 2 defenders completely unblocked on the edge. Meanwhile, 3 linemen end up locking onto a single Chicago defender, a moment that has already been turned into memes, screenshots, and angry breakdowns all across X. What makes this even more bizarre is how consistent these mistakes look. The fan who put the video together didn't cherry-pick random plays. They slid clip after clip showing similar breakdowns, players looking around with no urgency, bodies drifting into the wrong lanes, and defenders freely sprinting toward Shedeur before the receivers even finish their first steps. At one point, you can clearly see a lineman standing upright, scanning for someone to block while the defender he was supposed to pick up rushes straight past him. It doesn't look like bad football. It looks like confusion, hesitation, or something deeper. And that's exactly why this footage spread so quickly. It wasn't outrage bait. It wasn't exaggerated. It was visual evidence that something is fundamentally broken in the Browns' offense. Even former players chimed in, saying they'd never seen 3 linemen block one guy while 2 defenders came untouched off the blind side. Retired quarterbacks called it dangerous. Analysts called it unacceptable. And fans called it what it felt like, sabotage, even if that word is dramatic. But the footage did more than expose technical flaws. It sparked a bigger question about what's happening inside Cleveland. Because plays this messy don't come from nowhere. And what surfaced next made the situation even harder to ignore. What happened after the footage dropped was almost more telling than the footage itself. Within minutes, fans, former players, and analysts across social media started dissecting every frame like it was a crime scene. And the tone was striking, not confused, not cautious, but alarmed. Because this wasn't the typical rookie quarterback struggling conversation. This was people pointing fingers directly at the offensive line, asking whether the unit was simply overwhelmed, or whether something else was bubbling beneath the surface. One retired offensive lineman posted a breakdown that instantly went viral. He slowed down one particular play, the same one where 3 linemen locked onto a single defender, and said bluntly, This isn't miscommunication. This is a unit that's not on the same page mentally at all. Another analyst added that these weren't just mental errors, they were effort inconsistencies, a polite way of suggesting some players simply weren't trying. That wording alone ignited a whole new wave of speculation. And fans didn't hold back. Some accused the players of quitting on the season. Others claimed they were frustrated with coaching. A few even suggested, without evidence, that certain linemen didn't want Shedeur under center, rumors that spread quickly but remain unverified. Still, the fact that fans even felt comfortable saying that shows how visible the dysfunction has become. Even more interesting were the reactions from people outside the Browns' fanbase. Neutral observers from other teams were stunned, saying they'd never seen an NFL offensive line repeatedly miss obvious assignments like this. One fan compared it to watching a college team that forgot to practice protections. Others said the plays looked like they came from a team that had simply stopped believing in the scheme or the person running it. And then came the stat sheets. Analysts pulled up numbers showing Cleveland ranked near the bottom in sacks allowed, pressures allowed, and blown blocks, not for a week, but for the season. That only fueled the idea that this wasn't a one-game meltdown, but a trend that's been building for weeks. But the commentary truly shifted when people realized something deeper. These protection breakdowns weren't just hurting drives, they were putting Shedeur at real physical risk. And once that became the focus, the conversation got even more heated and way more personal. As more people started reviewing the footage, the conversation shifted from frustration to genuine concern. Not just concern about wins and losses, but concern for Shedeur Sanders' safety. Because when an offensive line repeatedly leaves defenders untouched, that's not just sloppy football. That's a quarterback one mistimed hit away from disaster. And for a rookie who already came into the league with years of punishment on his body, the stakes felt even higher. Analysts began pointing out something fans hadn't fully noticed. The hits Shedeur takes aren't just frequent, they're violent. Whether he's standing in the pocket or scrambling for his life, defenders are arriving unchallenged, full speed, with no resistance in front of them. One breakdown even highlighted how Shedeur's pocket collapses faster than nearly any quarterback in the NFL. When a rookie has less than 2 seconds to process, read, react, and throw, that's not development. That's survival mode. And that's when a worrying theory started circulating. Is the organization unintentionally stunting his growth? Not by design, but by neglect. Reports surfaced earlier in the season hinting that some players inside the locker room weren't fully bought into the offensive structure. Others suggested communication issues between the coaching staff and the O-line room. None of this is confirmed, but the patterns on film line up with a unit that is mentally disconnected, physically overwhelmed, or both. Even more revealing were comments from former quarterbacks. One said, "If this was happening to a veteran, it'd be a problem. But doing this to a rookie, that's a fast track to ruining him." Another added that young QBs who take repeated uncontrolled hits often develop phantom pressure, a mental scar where they start expecting failure before the play even begins. And watching Shedeur force himself to stay calm in collapsing pockets only made the concerns louder. Fans noticed something else too, the receivers running long, slow developing routes even when the protection wasn't holding up. That means Shedeur's reads were often unavailable, not because he didn't see the field, but because his receivers simply weren't open yet. It added to the frustration. It added to the fear. And it added to the narrative that this offense is out of sync at every level. But as bad as all that looked, the next discovery in the footage was even more shocking and far harder to explain. Just when fans thought they had seen the worst of the Browns' protection issues, a new clip dropped online. And this one hit different. It didn't just show miscommunication or bad technique. It showed something that people struggled to explain in any normal football context. The video came from an all-22 angle, posted by a fan who'd been slowing down every snap just to understand why Cleveland's offense always looked like it was falling apart. But what he found ended up going viral in less than an hour. The play was a simple 3rd and long, nothing unusual at first glance. But once you slowed the footage down, the scene almost didn't feel real. 5 offensive linemen stepped backward in near-perfect sync, But instead of spreading out to pick up the rush, 4 of them flowed toward the right side of the field. Not 2, not 3, 4. And the craziest part, only 1 defender was rushing from that side. This left the left edge completely unprotected. 2 defenders came through untouched, sprinting at Shedeur like they'd been shot out of a cannon. The running back tried to step in, but he had no chance. It was an instant collapse, the kind you normally see when someone misses an assignment, not when an entire line drifts away like they're blocking ghosts. People immediately started asking the same question. How does an NFL offensive line lose track of 2 unblocked defenders at the exact same time? Some blamed coaching, others blamed the players. A few fans pushed a harsher narrative, suggesting the linemen simply didn't care. And while that theory isn't confirmed and probably isn't fair, the footage made it impossible to defend the performance on the field. Even retired linemen jumped online to say they'd never seen 3 blockers latch onto 1 defender while 2 others ran free. One former Pro Bowler bluntly said, "This is offensive line malpractice." And for Shedeur, the play almost ended in disaster. He barely escaped by spinning out of the pressure and sprinting toward the sideline, a move that looked more like a college scramble drill than an NFL-designed play. And yet, he somehow turned the broken moment into a first down, proving exactly why people believe he has star potential. But the clip left everyone with a chilling realization. If Shedeur has to be superhuman just to survive a single play, what does that say about the team around him? And as the fan reactions rolled in, the tone shifted from frustration to anger, because the next part of the story was even uglier. By the time the clip made its rounds online, fans weren't just annoyed, they were furious. And not the kind of temporary frustration you see after a bad game. This was a deeper, more personal anger, coming from people who felt like they were watching their young quarterback fight for his life every snap with nobody backing him up. The comment sections under the viral post were filled with people saying the same thing. This isn't football. This is sabotage. Now, whether that word is fair or exaggerated is up for debate, but the emotion behind it was. Browns fans have sat through years of quarterback struggles, endless coaching changes, and promises that never materialize. So when they see a rookie with clear talent getting blindsided repeatedly because of protections that look like they belong in a backyard game, not the NFL, frustration spills over fast. Some fans blamed poor communication. Others said the offensive linemen had mentally checked out. A few even speculated, again, unverified, that certain players were frustrated with the coaching staff and weren't fully bought in. That kind of rumor spread quickly, not because it was confirmed, but because the film looked so chaotic that people were desperate for an explanation. What made the situation worse was that analysts outside Cleveland chimed in, and their reactions weren't kinder. One national commentator said the Browns' protection looked less organized than some high school teams. Another said Shedeur is being asked to perform miracles behind a group that doesn't even look like they're communicating basic assignments. Fans also pointed to earlier games, pulling up clips from weeks prior that showed similar breakdowns, guards turning the wrong way, tackles blocking air, centers failing to pass off rushers. Once people realized these moments weren't isolated incidents, it started looking like a pattern. And patterns, especially bad ones, are impossible to ignore. Even players from other teams began liking posts about the footage, a quiet but telling sign that the situation in Cleveland had caught national attention. And all of this pressure, the fan outrage, the analyst breakdowns, the mounting clips, was building toward one unavoidable question. How long can the Browns keep pretending everything is fine when the film is telling the world a completely different story? Because the next part of the conversation wasn't just about blocking. It was about whether Shedeur Sanders was being set up to fail before he could even settle into his career. As more people dug into the footage, the conversation shifted from bad blocking to something much bigger and much more concerning. Fans weren't just asking why the offensive line was struggling. They were asking why the Browns haven't fixed it, even though the issues have been obvious for weeks. And that question opens a door the organization hoped no one would walk through. Because here's the part that really started raising eyebrows. Shedeur Sanders isn't just any rookie. He's the face the team drafted to reset the franchise, the player ownership publicly praised, the guy they promised to build around. But what does build around even mean if he's spending half of every game running for his life? Rumors quickly surfaced, again, unverified but widely discussed, that certain veterans weren't thrilled about the attention Shedeur receives. A few fans suggested resentment. Others speculated frustration with the coaching staff was spilling over onto the field. Whether any of that is true or just fans trying to make sense of chaos, the reality remains. The offensive line isn't performing at a level that allows any quarterback to succeed, let alone a developing rookie. And that's where analysts across the country stepped in. Several pointed out that Shedeur has shown elite flashes, tight window throws, quick processing, impressive improvisation. But those moments disappear because the foundation around him is unstable. One analyst compared the situation to putting a high-performance engine in a car with no frame. That comment hit home because it highlighted the real issue. Cleveland's problems aren't about talent. They're about structure. The same miscommunications, the same blown protections, the same lack of chemistry, they show up week after week. And if fans can see it from their couches, it's impossible to believe the coaching staff doesn't see it too. Which leads to the uncomfortable thought spreading through the fanbase. If the organization truly believed in Shedeur, wouldn't they be doing everything in their power to protect him? Instead, it feels like the opposite. He's getting hit more. The protection gets worse. The mistakes by the line get louder. And every time he pulls off a miracle escape, it only masks how broken things actually are. But as the spotlight grows and pressure mounts, the Browns won't be able to hide behind excuses much longer. Because there's a new conversation forming, one that threatens to explode in the coming weeks. Is this still about bad execution? Or is it time to question the leadership running the offense? As the backlash grew, one truth became harder to ignore. At some point, the blame stops falling on individual players and lands squarely on the coaching staff. And for Cleveland, that spotlight is getting hotter by the day. Because these protection breakdowns aren't random. They aren't occasional. They're systemic, the kind of repeated failures that suggest deeper issues with preparation, scheme, or leadership. Fans began revisiting interviews from earlier in the season, paying closer attention to Kevin Stefanski's body language, tone, and comments about offensive execution. And the more they replayed those moments, the more it felt like the coaching staff was hinting that the players were at fault without ever acknowledging their own responsibility. That rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, especially when the film tells a completely different story. For example, analysts pointed out that Cleveland frequently sends receivers on long developing routes, even though the offensive line can't hold up for more than 2 seconds. Others noticed that several protection calls appear mismatched to the defensive look, something that falls on coaching, not players in the trenches. When these kinds of errors pile up week after week, it becomes nearly impossible to believe the staff is adjusting effectively. Even former players chimed in, saying the Browns' offense looks unstable, poorly organized, and predictable. Not exactly the descriptions you want when you're grooming a rookie quarterback who already faces enormous pressure. And when that rookie is taking unnecessary hits, dodging free rushers, and scrambling for survival because the scheme doesn't protect him, the accountability has to move higher than the offensive line. What made things even more suspicious to fans was the timing of the team's roster moves. Signing a wide receiver, waving a guard, minor shuffle here, small adjustment there, changes that look more like patches than solutions. Because if the coaching staff truly believed the protection problems were fixable from within, wouldn't we see real adjustments by now? Instead, the same breakdowns keep happening, and Shedeur keeps paying the price. That's why the conversation has shifted from, are the offensive linemen failing? To, is the coaching staff failing the entire offense? And as more film surfaces and more analysts call out the obvious problems, it's becoming clear that the pressure is moving upward, toward the people designing the plays, setting the protections, and failing to adapt. But the most explosive part of this story isn't just about coaching mistakes. It's about how those mistakes could shape Shedeur Sanders' entire future. At this point, The real question is whether the Browns' offensive line is bad. Everyone can see that. The question is how long Shedeur Sanders is expected to survive behind it. Because when a quarterback is being hit this often, this early in his career, the danger goes far beyond a few bad games. It threatens development, confidence, and longevity. And fans are starting to ask a question that should terrify Cleveland's front office. How much more of this will Shedeur tolerate? Remember, Shedeur didn't come into the league as some quiet rookie hopping to blend in. He came in with expectations, with a national spotlight, and with a father who is arguably one of the most outspoken and influential figures in football. Deion Sanders knows what it takes to build a winning program. He's done it everywhere he's been. He also knows what happens when an organization fails to protect its quarterback. And if anyone thinks he'll sit quietly, while his son gets folded behind a line that looks lost half the time, they're fooling themselves. Reports already suggest that some frustration is brewing behind the scenes. Nothing explosive, nothing public, but enough whispers to make people wonder if the Browns realize how fragile this moment truly is. Because Shedeur hasn't complained. He hasn't pointed fingers. He hasn't thrown teammates under the bus. He's handled every hit, every blunder, every failed protection call with maturity. But even the most composed quarterbacks eventually reach their limit. And here's the part that should worry Cleveland even more. Other teams are watching. Other front offices. Other coaches. They know what Shedeur can be with real protection and real structure. They see the flashes, the escape artist moments, the perfect deep balls, the calm under pressure. They know that if Cleveland doesn't fix their issues fast, someone else eventually will. Players don't openly request trades in year one. That's not how it works. But the NFL has changed. Quarterbacks have power now. They can shape careers, shift franchises, and force decisions. If things keep trending downward, the Browns may find themselves in a situation where protecting Shedeur becomes the storyline of the entire offseason. And if they fail that assignment, the consequences could be massive. Because at the end of the day, the Browns aren't just fighting to fix their offense. They're fighting to keep the quarterback, who might be the only hope they have left. At this point, everything surrounding the Browns feels like a crossroads. The offensive line struggles, the questionable coaching decisions, the lack of adjustments. All of it is piling up at the worst possible time for a young quarterback trying to find his footing in the league. And while Shedeur Sanders has shown toughness, leadership, and flashes of star-level talent, none of that will matter if the organization around him refuses to evolve. Cleveland now faces a simple but urgent choice: invest in protecting the future or risk losing it altogether. Because quarterbacks like Shedeur don't come around often, and if the Browns don't act fast, they won't just lose games, they could lose the one player capable of changing everything.